Coming to you from Abraham Lincoln Bookshop. My name is Bjorn Skaptison. I'm coming to you today from the Abraham Lincoln Bookshop Zoom room, better known as my office at Abraham Lincoln Bookshop. And today we are going to discuss, today we have Tim Smith, Dr. Tim Smith with us, and we are going to discuss his recent book on the Union assaults at Vicksburg, called The Union Assaults at Vicksburg, Grant Attacks Pemberton, May 17 through 22, 1863. And before we talk about that, I want to send out, we are streaming this from a Zoom to Facebook Live, and I want to send out some greetings and some thanks to a couple of Facebook groups that have supported this program. They've supported this program by cross-promoting it to their Facebook groups, and we would be happy to cross-promote anything that some other Civil War groups might want to do using their Facebook accounts, either cross-promoting with them or cross-promoting our events with you. So thanks go out to Derek Lindo and Daryl Smith of the Western Theater in the Civil War Facebook group and blog. The blog is a newly created blog that focuses on the Civil War in the Western Theater, and it's giving a lot of people an opportunity to write original short form history, in other words, blog-centered history of the Civil War in the Western Theater. And you're going to see all sorts of really interesting stuff over there. I've already looked at their blog, and they have newly printed, edited letters from soldiers and people writing about stuff that interests them personally and their family, things like that. So I think the Civil War, I think the Western Theater Civil War Facebook group and blog are going to be a real interesting and a real interesting resource going forward. I also want to thank Perry Kuski and the folks at the Shiloh Discussion Group. And they have a Facebook group and a message board at Shiloh Discussion Group. I know both me and our guest today have had a lot of real life encounters with the folks at the Shiloh Discussion Group. And hopefully, Tim, you'll be able to see them as soon as next November if everything goes right.
Hope so. Who knows in today's world, but we're planning on it right now.
Excellent. The Great Shiloh Hike, the Shiloh Discussion Group Epic Shiloh Hike. They do that every year, and hopefully they'll do it again this year. Anyway, thank you and welcome to whoever may be watching, especially folks from those groups. The Western Theater and the Civil War Facebook group and the Shiloh Discussion Group Facebook group. Today's discussion is with Dr. Timothy B. Smith, who has written The Assaults at Vicksburg, a little bit about Dr. Smith. Tim Smith teaches history at the University of Tennessee, Martin. He's past ranger at the Shiloh National Military Park and Civil War Interpretive Center. And he is the author of many Civil War books, including, just a short list, Grant Invades Tennessee, the 1862 Battles for Forts Henry and Donelson, Corinth, 1862, Siege, Battle, Occupation, Shiloh, Conquer or Perish. Those three, along with the current book, all come to you from the University Press of Kansas, and we thank them for helping get Tim together with us today and for producing the book that we're going to talk about. Also, previous to that, Tim was the author of Champion Hill, The Decisive Battle for Vicksburg, Mississippi and the Civil War, and I only chose books that were somehow related to this. I didn't even choose the books of essays or the biography of the Civil War governor of Mississippi. You've done a lot of great writing, Tim, and I only included the ones that are about this book. Also previously published, I want to show you a couple, and being offered for sale by us. The Decision Was Always My Own, which Tim wrote a couple of years ago, and The Real Horse Soldiers. the Benjamin Gerson's epic 1863 Civil War raid through Mississippi. Today, finally, let's get to today's conversation. Today we have the Union assaults on Vicksburg. Grant attacks Pemberton, May 17 through 22, 1863. Comes to us from the University Press of Kansas. Came out this year, 2020. These are first editions that we're offering, and they are signed by Tim Smith on an exclusive Abraham Lincoln Bookshop book plate. Thank you very much, Tim, for sending us some signed book plates. Some people like directly signed books, but they don't like to get sick with, COVID-19. So a book plate is the next best thing. The book is $34.95, and you can order it from us on a link that's in the comments. Finally, we're through with the introductions. Welcome, Tim. Welcome back to Abraham Lincoln Bookshop.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
So what was I going to talk about? Oh, yes, Vicksburg. Now, Tim, Vicksburg is a campaign that occurred pretty much in your backyard. When you were a kid, I know you're from central Mississippi, you're from that area, and I want you to tell us about that. What was it like? I know you, and then I know you've written about Shiloh and all these other things. What was it like to start writing about the Civil War in your backyard, the Civil War in Mississippi?
Well, it gives it a personal flavor, of course. A couple of different areas in that. Number one, I had numerous ancestors in the Civil War, and following them around where they were and so on gives it a personal touch, but also where I live, where I grew up. I wrote in the introduction of the Grierson's Raid book that I had lived along the path of the raid in several different areas. Of course, I went to got my PhD at Mississippi State, and Grierson went right through Starkville. I lived right on the route up in Pontotoc County near Pontotoc. Live up in Tennessee now, close to where it started. So being in those specific areas, it just adds a real personal touch to it, and allows you to get out and have a familiarity with the terrain and with the geography that, if I was writing about something that happened in, Northern California or something, I'd really have to study maps and all that, and best case, go out there. But it would be I would be a step behind starting off. But doing it right in your own backyard, you kind of have a leg up a little bit. I grew up in a place called Carrollton, Mississippi, which is basically between Jackson and Memphis, a couple hours from Vicksburg probably. Right in the middle of Vicksburg Campaign operations. It's just south of Grenada, which during the Mississippi Central Campaign in late 1862, the Confederate Army fell back behind the Yallabusha line, the Yallabusha River, to Grenada. So just south of Grenada. It's about 15 or so miles east of Greenwood, which anybody out there that knows about the Yazoo Pass operation, that expedition, Fort Pemberton was at the on the Tallahatchie River, where the Yazoo begins, where the Yallabusha and the Tallahatchie nearly come together. And so it's about 15 miles or so east of Greenwood in Fort Pemberton. So lots of stuff right in the area there that was really interesting growing up in the midst of all of that.
Did you visit those sites when you were a kid? Did you get out and look at all those?
Oh yeah. Always been interested in history and particularly the Civil War, and that's where the ancestor thing comes in. You look for your ancestors, find out where they were, and all of that, and it just adds a little bit of a homegrown, hometown, personal feel to it.
Was there a place, a specific place that you felt like, well, this is just the place I know about? Whether it's Fort Pemberton or something like that. That when you were a kid or a teenager you could go to, and everybody else went to Vicksburg or Shiloh, but I know about this place and I'll go find it.
Probably not really. I mean, if you've ever been to Fort Pemberton, there's nothing there hardly. There's a little monument and just a little bit of of a parapet that's left, and whether it's original or not, who knows? But really, I would go to the Shilohs and the Vicksburgs like everybody else, you know.
Well, let's get to Vicksburg. And you have more than one book about Vicksburg. Of course, this is the one that we're talking about today, but there's another one that's forthcoming that you've already worked on. But I guess my first question is, considering all of the, gosh, how do I put this? Considering all the stuff that's been written about Vicksburg, considering all the many volumes, and of course Edwin Cole Barth, the stuff he wrote, but I mean, going all the way back, with all the stuff written about Vicksburg, why do you think that there have not been any really careful studies of the battles? It seems to me that whether you start with, you know, your Champion Hill book, or now you're coming to Vicksburg and actually looking at the battles, other than maybe, you know, Barth's writing about the whole campaign, there don't seem to be books about the battles, and there's an enormous amount of writing about the campaign, about Vicksburg.
Right. Well, with the exception of Champion Hill, probably, most of those battles are fairly small. It would be hard probably to write a standard size, certainly a 400 or 500 page book on Raymond or Big Black River Bridge, because they're fairly short, fairly limited numbers. You could probably get a small monograph out of Port Gibson, and I've had people try to talk me into doing Port Gibson. Not much to Jackson, but obviously the assaults, particularly to the assaults. I think the reason probably that they've been neglected is that they fall between two major epochs or eras of the Vicksburg Campaign. You have that massive, brilliant movement from, you know, May the 1st, April 30th to May the 1st to May the 17th, where Grant fights those 5 battles and wins all 5 in a matter of 17 days. That's the stuff of legend. That's the brilliant movement that everybody wants to hear about. And then you have the siege, of course, that gets a lot of the attention. And falling in between those two, it's almost kind of like halftime. You know, let's take a break and let's just kind of skirt over these assaults, which I think the common conception is, well, they really didn't matter. They didn't decide anything. Didn't matter. So why waste time on them? You know, but they did matter, and they were very important. And so I think it's fitting that we have something about those. I'd long wanted to do something on the assaults, and my friend Mike Ballard, you remember Mike Ballard, was always going to do the siege. He was going to work on the siege. So I called him up one day, and I didn't want to step on any toes thinking about doing the assaults. And I said, you know, if you're going to deal with the assaults in any detail in your siege book, I won't fool with it. And he said, no. He said, I really believe the siege starts on the 23rd anyway. You know, everybody talks about 47 days of siege. Well, the siege is not but about 44, 43 or so. He said, you do the assaults, I'll do the siege. And that was the plan. Unfortunately, Mike passed away a couple of 3 years ago, very sad. And he never got to write his siege book. So actually, I'm following the assaults book with a book on the siege, in large part in his memory. So
okay, and that's a great thing to do, because there needs to be, I think, a book about the siege that differentiates it from the assaults. Clearly, as you point out in this assaults book, it is 2 different types of battles. In fact, one is a battle and the other is a siege, and there is a distinct separation.
Absolutely.
What made you decide to describe the time frame for the battles? Now, you've decided on May 17 through 22 as the assaults on Vicksburg. Of course, May 19th and the May 22nd are the actual big engagements. But you start on May 22nd. How do you feel that? Why do you feel that May 22nd is like how does that become the launch point for analyzing these two assaults as one battle, the assaults.
Well, you mean May the 17th, you mean, I assume.
Oh, May 17th, yeah. I must have said May 22nd. May 17th is the beginning.
Well, May 17th is kind of the watershed that divides that earlier brilliant campaign, as I described it, the 5 battles in 17 days. And once you get past that, there are no more battles to get to Vicksburg. Grant is fighting his way to Vicksburg, basically. And once he wins at Big Black River Bridge, you know, Vicksburg, the Confederates have fallen back into the fortifications of Vicksburg. So there's nothing else between Grant and Vicksburg. But I think more importantly, probably, it's this time period. You have to set the stage for the opening assault, of course, on May the 19th. And that comes on the day before the 18th, and even some on the 17th. When Grant is really moving across what is the last impediment to Vicksburg. Now, obviously, you have the Confederate Army that has been out trying to find him and gets caught, basically, and all of that at Champion Hill and at Big Black River Bridge. But it's the geographical feature of the Big Black River itself that really is the last impediment that Grant has to get across to approach Vicksburg, because the Confederates aren't going to make another stand at Bavina or Mount Albans or any place like that. Once Grant gets across the Big Black River, then he's got a straight shot to Vicksburg. And so it's on the 17th and the night of the 17th and early on the 18th that Grant begins to cross that last impediment. And so that's why I start at that point to kind of differentiate between the campaign before and the movement straight to Vicksburg then.
Okay. Then once he's there, Grant makes this decision that he's going to go right into Vicksburg, or maybe he thinks he can just follow the Confederates right into Vicksburg. What is his thinking? What is his thinking that leads him to believe that he can make these assaults if he moves fast enough?
Well, just like everybody else, he's overconfident at this point. In fact, I've been labeled a Grant apologist and a Grant fan and all that. In a certain degree, I am, but I'm not afraid to call him out in certain areas. And if Grant has a major issue or problem, particularly the first half of the war, it's not his drinking, it's not other issues, it's his overconfidence. And you see that at Belmont and Fort Donelson and Shiloh, and earlier in the Vicksburg campaign in February, he's writing Julia, telling her, I think I'll have Vicksburg in a fortnight. And then he later tells her, once I get a foot on the east side of the river, I think it's a done deal. And of course, it's anything but. So he's a little overconfident. And you see that in crossing the Big Black River. He gives Sherman orders that if you can go on into Vicksburg, do it, go on, and now, it never dawns on him that it's going to be months before, 6 weeks or so before we actually can enter Vicksburg. So this overconfidence thing kind of trips him up, but you kind of give him a pass a little bit, because who wouldn't be? I mean, he's fought 5 battles in the last 17 days, whipped the Confederates every single time. He's facing John Pemberton, for goodness sakes. That's a part of the equation. And so, you can kind of understand why he would think we'll just march up to Vicksburg and knock on the door, and they'll just kind of faint and we'll move right on in. And so, there's not a lot of planning that goes into the May 19th assault. Grant thinks that, we'll just move right on up there and just take possession and be done with it.
Mm-hmm. And it does seem to follow with the, good, solid military strategy. Anybody, any military academy or any strategic teaching will always emphasize that once you're winning, keep pursuing. Don't stop and let them get away.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and that's sound. I mean, I would have probably thought the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
And so he launches that attack, and I think most of his commanders figure out this may not be such a bright idea. And in fact, most of them don't assault.
Right.
It's only one division of Sherman's Corps, 15th Corps, that actually makes an assault.
Yeah, I guess this sort of, you already kind of answered the next question I was going to ask. Did his commanders agree with this decision? I'm thinking just about the three corps commanders.
Right.
And clearly, two of the three corps commanders found excuses to not try on May 19th. Now, could they have gone in, or were they just so far behind that they couldn't have gotten there by May 19th?
I think
McPherson and McClernand.
In terms of time and space, they certainly could have, but they're very careful at this point, moving forward carefully. McClernand just inching his way forward. McPherson not even, he's just kind of taking positions. But it's Sherman that's always kind of the, let's say the hothead, but the rah-rah, let's go get them kind of thing. And he's all, at this point, he's all for sending Blair's division, because he thinks, just like Grant, that this is going to be a done deal. Not going to take much, and we'll have Vicksburg by nightfall. That's a very different sense, and I'm sure we'll get to May the 22nd in a little bit, but he has a very different attitude on May the 22nd.
Okay. Let's move on let's move toward the May 19th engagement first. If we're going to move through the book chronologically.
Okay.
But let's start with how did the Confederate engineers, you've always made a very important accent on geography. Terrain has always been very important to your writing, whether you're writing about Fort Donelson or Shiloh or Corinth. So in this case, how did the Confederate engineers exploit the local geography, particularly the drainage systems around their fortifications, in order to protect this fortress?
Right. Well, all that falls to Chief Engineer Samuel Lockett, who fashions these fortifications back in the previous fall, in September, October, November of 1862. Lockett is detailed to figure out a way to fortify Vicksburg, the rear of Vicksburg. Everybody considers this the rear of Vicksburg, the Mississippi Riverfront being the front where all the action is going to take place. And so Lockett, he talks about there's never been a bigger topographical puzzle to any engineer than what I had to do. And he spent weeks, analyzing where to put the fortifications and all that. And it's not just the rearward fortifications either. Lockett is tasked with fortifying all of Vicksburg, which consists of really four major cordons of defense, if you will. Number one, the river batteries that were supposed to stop any river traffic. As we know, in the summer of 1862 and the spring of 1863, it doesn't stop all river traffic, but it's certainly there to discourage river traffic, I guess. And then you have outlying defenses, which run southward toward Warrenton, on the river, northward along the Yazoo River, up towards Snyder's Mill and Haynes Bluff. Those are the fortifications that Sherman attacked in late December of 1862 at Chickasaw Bayou. Then you have the eastward defenses that are supposed to block any movement from that area, and those are along the Big Black River. You have the various fords and ferries on the southern part of the Big Black River: Hankinson's Ferry, Hall's Ferry, Baldwin's Ferry. All of those have fortifications at them. Of course, the most famous are the Jackson Road and the railroad entrance are moving across the river at what we call Big Black River Bridge, where the battle was fought on May the 17th. So you have these outlying fortifications, and if all of those fail, if those fail and somehow the Union Army reaches the doorstep of Vicksburg, then you have the fourth cordon of defense, and that is the defenses in rear of Vicksburg that we know so well, and that are delineated in the Vicksburg National Military Park today. And if anybody's ever been to Vicksburg National Military Park, you can see where they have the trees cut. You can't see anything where this is heavily wooded, but in certain areas in front of the 3rd Louisiana Redan, the Great Redoubt, the Stockade Redan, the Railroad Redoubt, and so on, you can see absolutely why Lockett chose these areas to place the Confederate fortifications on the ridges, forcing anybody that would come to attack through these these watersheds, these ravines, and so on. And they're difficult to go through. All you have to do is go and look at them. You can get a picture looking at them. It's better to get down in them. And for any shallow discussion group folks,
it's a dramatic landscape, and I think a lot of people watching today may not have been to Vicksburg before.
Oh, really? Okay.
Can you do you have words to summarize how deep and daunting those ravines are?
Yeah, huge ravines. Think if you've been to Shiloh, Deal Branch, if you tooled around down in Deal Branch, somewhat probably more substantial than Deal's Branch even. And I was just about to say, any Shiloh discussion group folks that are going to be with us, hopefully in Vicksburg in November, we're going to get down and dirty in those ravines and see them and charge just like the Federals did and so on. So massive ravines that were absolutely daunting. I don't see how any troops did it under fire, but on most areas, the Federal forces, as they're assaulting on a small front on the 19th and then larger fronts on the 22nd, made it to the Confederate lines. They just couldn't push across and break the Confederate lines.
Now I'm actually going to say hello to a couple of people watching, because a number of people are watching this live, and I want to thank them. Want to give a shout out to Mark and to Dennis, and Bill Shepard from Abraham Lincoln Association is watching and wanted us to know that he had bought this book and The Real Horse Soldiers as part of this. So thank you, Bill.
Right. Thank you.
Dennis Meyer has a question, and I want to share Dennis's question. Folks on Facebook, I would just as soon ask your questions to Tim than sit here and go through all of mine, because Tim probably won't mind too much if I just call him on the phone and ask these questions, if I don't keep him up too late. But I do want to know, I do want to have a chance to ask your question. So if you have a question and you're watching this on Facebook Live, please write it in the comments and we will try to get it, we'll try to ask Professor Smith for you. Now, Dennis Meyer asks, the Vicksburg Campaign has often been underestimated in importance, even by Ken Burns in his movie. Why do you think that is the case?
Because Robert E. Lee wasn't there, and because it's in the West. And Nathan Bedford Forrest wasn't there either. So, we get into this same old thing about the East versus the West, and you name it on any media, most of the time the East and the Army of Northern Virginia and the Army of the Potomac and all of that's going to get the lion's share of the attention. Vicksburg is even in the Western theater, actually, I think we see it as not, how to say this, it's not even at the top of the Western theater.
Yeah.
Sometimes Chickamauga gets a lot of attention. I've always said if there is a Western Gettysburg, it's Shiloh. Everybody is all about Shiloh and name recognition and all that. So even in the Western theater, it's not held probably as highly as probably it should be. And that's probably partly because there is no, it's such a long drawn out campaign that is very detailed and not easily studied. But there are no national parks, for instance, at Champion Hill, although the trust has turned over some of the land in the state of Mississippi to the National Park Service and so on. But there's no visitor center like there is at Chancellorsville that you can go to at Champion Hill and a tour route or anything like that. Nothing except the Schaefer House, really, at Port Gibson. The folks at Raymond have done a good job down there, but there's not really a visitor center. There's nothing comparable to Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania, Wilderness, anything like that. And as a result, most of what you have in terms of the national park, and let's face it, in large degree, Americans judge probably what was most important as to what has national parks. If there's not a national park there, then it must not be important. Now, we know that's not true. It's the curious workings of politics, and we won't even get started on that. But in terms of what becomes national parks and what doesn't, not a lot of the Vicksburg campaign is enshrined in a national park. Just the assaults, the battlefield that we're talking about here in mid-May, and the siege itself. But there's so much more to the campaign than just that.
Okay. Now, as we discussed before we started, Tim, time is flying right along. As always seems to happen when we sit down and talk about the Civil War in the West. So we are going to pretty much just blow right by May 19th. And the folks at home can read the book and understand, there couldn't be a May 22nd if May 19th had worked.
Right.
So
well, May 19th.
Huh?
May 19th is just the Grant's it's not very organized. He's just gonna move up and take Vicksburg. It doesn't work. So Grant decides, all right, let's take a couple days off. Let's back up. Let's think through this thing. Let's prepare a little better. And then we'll launch a mass attack, and that will work. The quick punch didn't work. So we're going to prepare better and do it right, do it according to the book. And that'll tell the tale and take Vicksburg.
Now, Grant made a decision, he made a specific tactical decision to adopt particular tactical formations in the assault on May 22nd that were not used in the May 19th assault. How did, what did he want to do differently?
Well, he wanted to take Vicksburg, which obviously didn't work on the 19th. On the 19th, Blair's division, 3 brigades, 2 Smiths and a Ewing, basically just fanned out in linear formation like you would see at any reenactment, 2 ranks shoulder to shoulder, and they attacked through these ravines, and some made it to the Confederate parapets and planted their flags, most didn't, and then they all withdrew after dark when it was safer to do so. Grant figured out real quick that's not going to work with the terrain and doing a little bit of homework, that's not going to work. So he decides on the 22nd, we're going to do this either in columns of regiments or companies, or either moving what's called by the flank. And that's a term you'll hear sometimes. Basically what moving by the flank is everybody in 2 ranks, shoulder to shoulder line of battle, everybody turn to the left or right, and now you're in basically a column of 2s, and you wind like a snake wherever you go. Now you can also do this in larger formations, columns of companies, or even columns of regiments, or even columns of brigades, if you will. At Shiloh, the Confederates attacked in columns of corps. So there are different ways to do this, but basically the difference is, instead of a broad front attacking across the board everywhere, Grant wants to utilize little small just pinpricks, knowing that we don't have to break the line everywhere. All we've got to do is break the line at particular points, or even just one point, and then if we can flow reinforcements through there, turn to the left and right, we'll break the Confederate lines and take Vicksburg. So these little pinpricks are what Grant's depending on the 22nd, which ironically is exactly what the Confederates wanted him to do. They had laid out these fortifications, not thinking they would attack across these ravines. Who would be dumb enough to do that? There's no way they're going to take our lines if they do this. So let's funnel the enemy attacks in certain areas where we can just absolutely rake it with artillery fire and small arms fire, and force them to come across the easier points where the roads are, the Graveyard Road, the Jackson Road, the Baldwin's Ferry Road, and so on. And that's where Grant attacks on the 22nd. And it turns out that doesn't do any more good than the linear attacks on the 22nd, on the 19th. In fact, they figure out real quick that these pinprick formations, the Forlorn Hope at Stockade Redan and so on, aren't going to work, and the troops instinctively return to the linear formation down in the ravines. They form their lines of battle just like they've been accustomed to, because there's familiarity in that and strength in that, and so on. That's what they know best. So they go right back to the linear formations as they were used to.
Right. So Grant's plan to make the big change in tactics ultimately didn't work out,
No.
partially because of the strength of the Confederate strong points, and also because when the shooting started, the soldiers did what they knew.
Duck and cover.
Yeah, duck and cover. Yeah.
Well, a lot of them moved on, and again, they placed flags on the parapets, on the Forlorn Hope, on the Stockade Redan, and the Great Redoubt, and Third Louisiana Redan, and so on. But there just was not enough strength in those pinpricks to break any of the Confederate lines, with the exception, and it's arguable, at the Railroad Redoubt. There is a little bit of success there, which I'm sure we'll talk about in just a little bit, but that's really the only even semblance of success that occurs.
And we have another question. People continue to ask questions on the Facebook feed, so let's talk to a couple of folks there. Derek Lindau from the Civil War in the Western Theater Facebook group is asking, did Grant discount the terrain difficulties because he believed that the Confederate morale was too low?
Probably some of that, yes. He thinks that we're just going to basically just march up to them and scare them out of their wits, and they're going to fall down and faint, basically, and we'll have Vicksburg. So the terrain is not that big an issue. I mean, he's seen difficult terrain before. If you've ever been to Fort Donelson and seen the February the 15th breakout area, that's some pretty rough terrain. Or we'll see if Smith's left flank and so on. If you've been to Shiloh and Deal Branch, I mean, he's seen difficult terrain before, and he knows troops can overcome that. But again, he has this mindset that the Confederates are just going to just fall over and play dead, because he's whipped them 5 times in the last 17 days. Now, what he doesn't know specifically is that the Pemberton is smart enough. You know, we give Pemberton a lot of grief and so on, but Pemberton is smart enough to place his best troops, his most stout troops, in the areas that he thinks will probably bear the brunt of the assaults. And so Forney's division and Smith's division, that do bear the brunt of the assaults, had not been involved in these debacles, particularly at Champion Hill on the 16th and Big Black River Bridge on the 17th. They had been manning Snyder's Bluff and Haynes Bluff and Warrenton and the city of Vicksburg. So they had not been caught up in these debacles, and as a result, their morale is not quite as shot as say Bowen's division or Carter Stevenson's division. Of course, Loring's not in there. So yeah, I mean, Grant. I think he's playing on the morale factor, but it's not as big an issue as he thinks it may be.
Now we have also. I lost one of these comments here. Let me look at this again. Okay, I'm going to jump back over to the comments here in a minute, because a lot of people are talking about Vicksburg. Thank you very much for jumping in and commenting and asking questions. But we have a little bit of time left, and I definitely want to get to some details on that May 22nd assault. Of course, we have the Forlorn Hope in the north on the attack on Stockade Redan, and we have the attacks on the Great Redan. Is that what it is? The Great Redan in the center there?
Great Redoubt.
Great Redoubt there in the center, where McPherson tries to get in there. But let's jump right on down to the Halls Ferry Road. Is that Halls Ferry Road on the
Baldwin Ferry Road?
Baldwin Ferry Road. Right. Halls Ferry is further to the south, of course.
Right.
The assault by John McClernand's 13th Corps right in there against those 2 very stout redoubts along the road, the 2nd Texas Lunette and the Railroad Redoubt.
Right.
Did McClernand break the line in that morning assault?
It's hard to tell if he did. He just barely did. He doesn't break the line at the Second Texas Loon Net. There's heavy fighting along the Baldwin's Ferry Road there. The railroad redoubt, a little farther to the south, apparently had a detached tip. It ran out, and you can still see the terrain today. It ran out kind of on a finger of land along the parallel with the railroad, and on the maps and the fortifications and so on, it kind of looks like an extended finger as the fortifications. And right on the tip of that was kind of a detached redoubt, if you will. And that is what the Federals of Lawler's, Michael Lawler's Iowans will take, and apparently plant their flag on the top of it. There are several Federals that actually enter the tip of this redoubt, and there's some hand-to-hand fighting inside of it. Ultimately, as it boils down, the Confederates are wounded, and some of them that are still manning the fortification there behind traverses and so on, they're hiding, they're taking cover, are confronting basically one wounded Federal that's holding the tip of the redoubt there inside of it. So it's not a major breach. It's not a breaking of the main Confederate line, which is farther to the west. But technically, McClernand's forces do take a portion of the earthworks and inhabit a very small part of the earthworks. And this starts the whole thing about McClernand then sending messages to Grant that I need reinforcements. I need you to restart the assaults elsewhere so that I can make good on this progress here.
Now, we have a question from Stan Buckles. Thank you, Stan, for sending in the question. And it results, it refers to this a little bit. You know, Stan?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But he's asking do you believe that McPherson and Sherman supported McClernand's continuing demand to continue the assault?
Well, I don't think Sherman and McClernand supported the original May the 22nd assaults at all. They did just enough to say they participated, but it was not an overwhelming participation at all. McClernand goes in head first with everything he's got. By the time McClernand sends these messages to Grant saying, I need support, I need broken through, the flags are flying over two Confederate fortifications, which, that's stretching the truth to begin with. Grant doesn't believe it. Grant is up with Sherman at this point and says, I don't believe a word of it. And it's actually Sherman that says, well, look, you got to treat this as official. If this is true, any semblance of truth, maybe we need to check this out and take advantage of it. And Grant changes his mind and said, well, yeah, I guess you're right. So we'll restart it. So he orders Sherman to restart his assaults. He rides down to McPherson, tells McPherson to send one division over to support McClernand and to restart the assaults on the Jackson Road. Here again, Sherman and McPherson only do just enough to say to get a participation trophy and and to say they were there and to make a little noise and to bring off maybe some heat from McClernand, but it's obvious that McClernand has not made any of the type of headway that he probably thinks truthfully that he has, and it's certainly not enough to win any victory there on the 22nd.
Right. And now I'm going to follow that up with a question that I was going to ask, which is really one that I've been wanting to ask you after I read this book. When McClernand decided, for whatever reason he did it, when McClernand decided that he was broken through and that everybody else should just go, was this the moment that McClernand put his head in the noose? Was this that wasn't the reason Grant fired him. He fired him later over the reports.
Right.
But did it seem, was this the moment when Grant could have thought of McClernand, we attacked on your demand and all these guys got killed. And now we find out that you weren't even close to getting through.
I think it was probably the proverbial last straw. McClernand has been getting under Grant's skin for really the whole campaign, going back to the Mississippi Central campaign when McClernand shows up waving his orders to take command of the Vicksburg expedition. You know, the orders from Stanton endorsed by Lincoln. He waves it in front of everybody's face, and he wants to be in charge. And then all of these issues that cropped up between the two for the rest of the campaign. But yeah, this whole thing about the May the 22nd, Grant is just livid with him. And I think Charles Dana, actually, the War Department liaison or mole or whatever you want to call it, excuse me, says it best. He says later in the siege, of course, when he's actually removed because of publishing orders that didn't go through headquarters, he says that is the occasion, but not the reason for the removal. And in large part, I think the May the 22nd actions is probably the largest reason for that.
Mm-hmm. Let me talk about what I think one of the traps that we fall into when we talk about both Vicksburg and the assaults, and you and I have talked about this, and we're doing it today, and the folks that are commenting are doing it today. It always seems like it's just a story of the Union side. Mm. It always seems that and certainly I think maybe Grant has the initiative, so he initiates the attacks, and we talk about whether they succeed or they don't. But a major part of the reason why this attacks did not succeed was this guy, was the Confederates and their commander, John Pemberton. So first, if you could just say, what did Pemberton play any active role in the defense on May 22nd? And maybe then more broadly say, what was the utility of what he did do?
He's not on the front lines by any means, but he is very aware of what's going on, and he's calling reinforcements and sending them to various places, and he's watching it. But by the time the assaults begin on the 22nd, everybody knows they're coming. He's pretty much done all he can do. He's put his divisions in position, and he's charged. And, you know, it's much like Grant at Shiloh when you set everything up, you just let the battle unfold. And that's pretty much what Pemberton did. And you're right, there's a lot less in there about the Confederates. And I really struggled with this in writing the book. It is a little Union tilted probably because there's a lot more sources dealing with the Union side. There's a lot more maneuvering and movement of troops and brigades and so on the Union side that you have to cover. The Confederates basically stayed stationary behind their earthworks, and when, you know, the Yankees made an assault, just pop your head over and fire volleys. There's only so many times in a narrative like this that you can say the Confederates fired a volley into the Union soldiers approaching. You know, I mean, there's only so many ways to say that over and over and over and over and over. So I struggled a little bit with having enough Confederate material and keeping the reader's attention on the Confederates as well. Although it's mostly the Union forces doing the maneuvering and the deciding and the attacking and all of that. So hope it turned out okay.
Yeah. Now I did have a question for one other question for you, Tim. I want to know if you liked my new wallpaper here in the office.
Let me switch over to.
I'll show it to you.
Oh, is that
I'll show it to you closely? And of course, as folks, as Tim knows, but as the folks at home will see, this is the Vicksburg Daily Citizen. And during the siege, maybe you'll have a chance to write about this when you get to the siege. During the siege, the editor of the Citizen, Mr. Swords, ran out of newsprint. They ran out of meat, and they ran out of food, and they ran out of ammunition, but they also ran out of newsprint. So the Citizen was printed on the back of unused wallpaper. And so this is something that folks that collect Civil War, if you collect if you collect about Vicksburg, if you collect about the Civil War, this is something you might want to consider. And this is an original Vicksburg Citizen. It only came out in one page. And this one came out on July 2nd, 1862, which was the last Citizen to be printed. But what we have here at the bottom, I'm going to show it to you real quickly, is that Swords did not finish his newspaper of July 2nd. In fact, it was unfinished and sitting on the press on July 4th when the Union soldiers came in. And here the last article in the July 2nd Vicksburg Citizen is dated July 4th. And it reads, and I quote, "Note, July 4th. 2 days bring about great changes. The banner of the Union floats over Vicksburg. General Grant has caught the rabbit, and he has dined in Vicksburg, and he did bring his dinner with him. The citizen lives to see it. For the last time, it appears on the wallpaper. No more will it eulogize the luxury of mule meat and fricasseed kitten." This is the last wallpaper edition, and this accepting this note from the types that we found them on, it will be valuable hereafter as a curiosity. I like that. It will be valuable hereafter as a curiosity. Somebody created a Civil War memento artifact that everybody would want, and then actually wrote on it, everybody's going to want this. So Abraham Lincoln Bookshop thanks the Vicksburg Citizen and the Union soldiers for recognizing that it would be such a valuable artifact hereafter. Tim, I also want to get your opinion on one other thing, and that is Mike Ballard's biography of Pemberton. Now, we talked about Mike before in the stuff he was writing about Vicksburg. Is this a good, valuable Pemberton biography? Would it go hand in hand with something on Grant?
Yeah, that's the standard academic biography of Pemberton. In fact, the only other one that you have was written by his grandson, which take that for what it's worth. It's not going to be a whole lot of questioning of decisions and so on in that. I mean, it's a substantial, all means, this O2 biography of Pemberton. Mm-hmm. Very well done.
Okay. Yeah, and it is a valuable one, and it certainly is one of Mike Ballard's finest works, and he did a lot of great work, especially on Vicksburg Campaign. Hey, the last thing I can do before we're getting to the point where we need to wrap up the conversation, and I thank everybody for asking their questions, and perhaps we can get to some of them in the comments. Perhaps I'll jump into the comment section, just type in some answers, or I'll run them by Tim, run the questions by Tim and type in some questions later. But I want to thank John. John Willens is out there from Lincoln Forum for joining us. Thank you, John. Thomas, Andrew Miller is commenting. John Priller's asked a couple questions, and I hope we can get to your questions, John. And we'll get to that, hopefully get some answers typed into the responses. But what I want to do is ask you one more question about Vicksburg, Tim. And this goes maybe a little bit outside of your book, because in order to get the story of May 19 and May 22nd, people are going to have to buy this book. Buy it from us. We will give you a signed Tim Smith bookplate, and we'll ship it right out to you. Tim, I want to ask you, I want to impress upon your experience with the National Park Service and your experience as a public historian in general, and the fact that you write all of these books with a real keen understanding of the geography and how the story of the geography is told. Like you said, if there's a national park, people tend to think that's an important battle. So at the Vicksburg National Military Park, can you tell me to what extent is the story of the assaults told when the visitors go around the park? To what extent can a visitor, when they're visiting the park, say, okay, right now I'm learning about the assaults, and later I'm talking about the siege? Because as we see, they're two different things, but the Park
Right.
Service has to tell both stories on the same ground, the same
Right.
resource, as they say.
Right. Oh, it's all there. You just have to know what you're looking at, and you have to be able to differentiate between, I guess, the layers of interpretation there. For instance, all blue markers, the iron tablets there, are going to be dealing with the Army of the Tennessee. The red ones are going to be dealing with the Confederates. But some of the red tablets may be talking about, this position was held the 36th Mississippi from June the 2nd to the end of the siege. That's siege stuff. But yet in another red tablet, it may say the 36th Mississippi held this face of the Stockade Redan on May the 19th and 22nd, and so and so. And then you put on top of that, there are bronze markers for the Iowa units, and their granite and statues, to mark Illinois units, and so on. And then you have the big state memorials that are put up. So when if you've never been there and you first get there, it can be a little overwhelming, and it looks like just a jumbled mess of a bunch of signs and tablets stuck out, on the side of the road and up in the woods and everywhere. But if you take the time to read them and digest what they're saying, then you can pick through whether it's siege or whether it's assaults or what.
We've discussed before about Shiloh, the difference between a monument and a tablet. Different people wrote them for different reasons, and they say different things, but they sit together. And when you visit as a visitor, you have a right to assume that they're both equally authoritative.
Exactly. Yeah. And Shiloh, of course, you may have lines of battle denoted by tablets and monuments and so on, and one may be a first day and one may be a second day, and the lines are sitting like that. One of my favorite places at Shiloh is, I believe it's the 70th Ohio or 72nd Ohio. You go back in toward Jones Field, and there are two tablets to the regiment there, and one is facing that direction and the other one's facing this direction, and one's a first day tablet, one's a second day tablet. They were at the exact same place, they were facing different directions though, and fighting on two separate days. So similar to what's at Vicksburg, you have to take the time to delve into what's on the tablets and look at them, and it's very rewarding when you do so. And that's what's so important. I give a plug for the battlefield preservation, the early veterans that established these parks, and the American Battlefield Trust that's preserving today. The best resource we've got is the battlefield. And for Shiloh books, the Vicksburg books, and so on, one of the best sources I had were the monuments that you could go out and look. Okay, who's in this line, where are they positioned, and so on. And it's much more difficult to do that, say, at Champion Hill or Port Gibson or something, where they're not marked like that. So we're fortunate to have the Vicksburgs and the Shilohs and so on in our national park system.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. That brings us to the end of our discussion about the Union assaults on Vicksburg. But let me repeat what it is. The Union, I need to get my notes. Here it is. The Union assaults at Vicksburg. Grant attacks Pemberton, May 17th through 22nd, 1863. Comes to us from University Press of Kansas, and we thank them for producing the book. 483 pages, lots of illustrations, lots of maps. And Tim, am I right to assume that there's something following this on the siege?
Yes, on the siege. Much bigger. A lot more terrain to cover there. So.
Okay, this is a question that Dan Weinberg of Abraham Lincoln Bookshop asked me the other day. He asked me, Bjorn, is this going to be a set? And I thought to myself, I don't even know. I haven't asked him that. It'd be like a 2-volume set.
yeah, I started on the assaults and then moved to the siege. Now I've gotten interested in the Chickasaw Bayou Mississippi Central campaign, so I'm working on right in the middle of that right now. And so I can see myself going and doing a book maybe on the winter Yazoo Pass, Steele's Bayou Canal, all that kind of stuff, and then finish up one on the 17 days, you know, in the movement toward Vicksburg. So it could very well conceivably turn out to be a 5-volume set, although it's not a, you know, where one stops, the other one picks up, just, you know, cold turkey kind of thing.
Right.
I've written each one to stand alone, but when put together, they certainly will continue the narrative. Very similar to what I did with the 3-volume trilogy on the Tennessee River Campaign. Each of those books, Fort Hunter and Donelson, and then Shiloh, and then Corinth, are standalone books. You don't have to have read the other ones to pick up, say, at Corinth, 1862 or something. But when you put them together, they make a nice little trilogy on the Tennessee River Campaign.
Okay. Well, we'll look forward to seeing those. And it sounds like you have a lot of work laid out for you.
It's a hobby.
Isn't enough work.
Yeah.
Our next program for the folks at home, our next program is coming up on Thursday, August 6th at 3:30. And that's Lucas E. Morrill, Lincoln and the American Founding. Now that's this one here. And that comes to us from Southern Illinois University Press. And it's part of their Concise Lincoln Library series. So join us on August 6th when Daniel Weinberg and Lucas Morrill will discuss Lincoln and the American Founding. Our next program after that one is this book right here that Tim and I discussed, Charles A. Dana, for a little bit. And that's Carl J. Guarneri, Lincoln's Informer, Charles A. Dana and the Inside Story of the Union War, again from University Press of Kansas. It did come out last year, but it's still a fresh book, an excellent book. Coming up on the 16th of September, that's a Wednesday, 16th of September at 3:30 in the afternoon, Peter Cousins will return to A House Divided with his new book, Tecumseh and the Prophet. That's going to be a really interesting book and a new look at those two great Native American leaders in east of the Mississippi, before the Civil War and before all of that. Tecumseh and the Prophet. Finally, Tuesday, August 6th, not even close to finally, Tuesday, August 6th at 3:30, H.W. Brands will be joining us to discuss The Zealot and the Emancipator, John Brown, Abraham Lincoln, and the struggle for American freedom. And then finally, the last event that I can announce for you today, even though that fall catalog, that fall schedule is filling up, on October 29th at 3:30, that's a Thursday, October 29th at 3:30, the cartoonist Durf Backdurf will be joining us to publicize and discuss his new graphic novel, Kent State, 4 Dead in Ohio. That's going to be a very interesting book about a different kind of Civil War, not the one that occurred in 1861 to 1865. Hey, thank you again to everybody who's joined us today for A House Divided. Thank you to Tim Smith for joining us and discussing the Union assaults at Vicksburg. And we will see you again soon. Again, we will see you on August 6th. So take care and have a great day.